Hi, I'm Dr. Nancy Clark, and my channel name is called Inner Majesty. This is where we talk about spiritual topics. Comment below if it resonates with you. In my published book called Master Plant Teachers, which is available on Amazon, Apple Books, Amazon Audible, and on Barnes & Noble online. Hello everyone, I'm coming to you today from beautiful Sedona, Arizona, and we're going to continue our lecture series today on Master Plant Teachers, and today we're going to be going into Chapter 3, which is titled Ancient and Current Cultures of Social Acceptance. Buddhism first came out of India. Buddha was a Hindu seeking enlightenment. And after achieving nirvana, he went on to teach a new way of absorption with the divine. Indian Buddhism came long before Tibetan Buddhism. Amrita is the entheogenic potion used by Tibetan Buddhism. Soma is the entheogenic elixir used by Indian Buddhism, as recorded in the Rig Veda. Amrita, entheogenic liquid, is seen in artwork being held in cups by the 16-armed Indian god Vajra. Soma is recorded in the Rig Veda as a plant god that is very sacred to the Hindus. Soma is an entheogenic mushroom with the power to give wisdom and strength. The Rig Veda is Sanskrit text over 3,500 years old and extremely devotional to the Hindus. In ancient Hindu scripture passages, Amrita is a psychotropic plant ground into a powder, and then water or milk was added to it to create an entheogenic liquid. Amrita, also known as Soma, which is referred to in the Rig Veda as a drink that will show one that they are eternal and live beyond this physical life. Soma was used in Hindu ceremonies, and the Brahma priest class drank the entheogenic liquid during the religious fire ceremonies. Soma, also known as Amrita, are different names, yet both are plant-based entheogens used in spiritual ceremonies. The ancient Hindus called it Soma. In Buddhism, it's referred to as Amrita. Amrita is a Sanskrit word with the meaning of immortality. The entheogenic potion called Amrita, just like Soma, would show the initiate in sacred ceremony of one's divinity. Soma, also known as Amatya mascara, is the entheogenic mushroom, which is red with the white spots on top of its head. There are scriptures in the Rig Veda discussing the characteristics of this hallucinogenic mushroom. A mushroom called psilocybin cubanus is locally grown in India. There are several varieties of psilocybin psychoactive mushrooms that grow in India. A modern tribe called Santal in the Bihar state region states that they know that the psilocybin mushroom has psychedelic properties. Soma is a sacred religious plant with psychedelic powers that was used in ceremonies in India. Soma originated from Siberian shamans who traveled to India, most likely on a spice route, and brought Soma with them for their religious ceremonies. The Siberian shamans introduced Soma to the local culture in India, where they settled and mingled amongst the people. The Siberian shamans living among the people in India would perform their religious ceremonies, and Soma was introduced and accepted into the culture of ancient India. The Rig Veda mentions Soma 120 times. In gratitude for this blessed mushroom, of godly qualities. Siberian shamans were known for the usage of Siberian mushrooms in their religious ceremonies. Soma power expression was used to imply that the psychedelic substance was in the drink and was a powerful ambrosia. An elixir denoting soma was an entheogenic plant-based drink used for ancient Hindu and ancient Buddhism ceremonies. Only in the Buddhist tradition it was called amrita. Yet both religious ceremonies it was a psychedelic mushroom potion. The first confirmation of shamans using magic mushrooms dates back to 8,000 to 6,000 BCE from carved artistry in a wall in the Tassali Valley of eastern Algeria. The cave carved etchit in the rock has the shaman holding a bundle of magic mushrooms in each hand. This verified that the psychotropic plants were used in ancient cultures. Many Indian demigods were entheogenic plants that were so sacred to the Indian priest that they placed them at the level of deity. In ancient India, a god, Rudra, is associated with the mushroom, muscaria, and then later, the god, Siva, became popular and is connected with the mushroom psilocybin. In Vajrayana Buddhism, mushrooms were used in religious ceremonies. Also, in Mexican tribes, the psilocybin mushroom was a divinity and therefore was a supreme deity. To ingest the psilocybin mushroom was to take communion with God's flesh, allowing the participant to receive this unity. Vajrayana Buddhism mentions feminine demigods named after different entheogens, and a person's experience communing with them causes similar after effects, as it has been confirmed through research that indeed the Hindu and Buddhist religions used entheogens in their initiation ceremonies. Soma, the entheogenic mushroom that was a deity, is recorded in the Rig Veda as far back as 2500 BCE and was brought into India by way of the spice routes from the shamans from Siberia. Soma was so worshipped that it was a blessed privilege to drink this godly potion and enter into a mystical experience. These sacred religious ceremonies ingesting the Soma, entheogenic god, were paramount in the participant in their religious beliefs and offered first-hand experience of union with the divine. In the Vedic tradition, Soma is the sacred elixir, and in the Buddhist tradition, Amrita is the holy ambrosia of the gods. Psilocybin was the entheogen utilized in the Buddhist Amrita sacred psycho-spiritual cordial served during their religious ceremony. A variety of entheogens were used in the Tibetan Buddhism, such as flowering plants, mushroom, psychoactive grasses, and possibly ayahuasca, due to the ability of trading between countries using the spice routes. Entheogens were used in initiation ceremonies to grant Buddhahood without the use of their routine spiritual practices to the initiate. The entheogenic plant called Soma also went by another name, Haoma, to mean the watery liquid, was removed and therefore was drank as a strong brew in a sacred plant ceremony with reverence. Soma predates the origins of Zoroastrian religions in Iran. Soma was so beloved that it was officially recognized as a god that came to earth and was venerated by Varuna, who was a Hindu god according to the Rig Veda texts. In Buddhism, the goddess Maharishi is holding the Asoka sprig, which is an entheogenic plant known to provide psychedelic experiences. The Asoka tree in Buddhism is a holy tree due to its known spiritual powers. These entheogenic plants communicated with the participants and transferred their powers to them. The Asoka tree is also called Kandamba tree, which has been found in a laboratory to have psychoactive properties similar to psilocybin and DMT, and therefore produces visions and mystical experiences. Modern-day initiations in the Vajrayana Buddhism is called the sacramental drink, Amrita, to provide an ego death to the initiate. In the past, Amrita was the entheogenic mushroom liquid, yet now, for several reasons, it is purely symbolic and an herbal drink. It has been discovered by ethnobotanists and pharmacologists that there are over 400 religious cultures around the world that have used entheogens to expand consciousness in their sacred ceremonies. Some of them include soma, the Amatya muscaria hallucinogenic mushroom documented in the ancient Rig Veda text used in the Hindu religion. The other entheogenic sacred plants include peyote from the North American Indians and psilocybin by the tribes in Mexico. The morning glory flower is an entheogenic that is used by ancient Mexican Aztecs in religious ceremonies. Ayahuasca has been used in sacred religious ceremonies and still is today in South America. Ergot was the sacred and visionary plant utilized annually in the religious ceremonies in ancient Greece at the Eleusis Mysteries temple complex. Iboga is the entheogenic holy plant still used in African religious ceremonies. And ibogaine, the pharmaceutical grade version, is used in modern cultures today. Soma is the ancient entheogenic mushroom, Amatya muscaria, that was used in Hindu religious ceremonies that originated from Siberia with the ancient trade routes that came to India. There was a couple, the Wassons, who discovered these special mushrooms and submitted them for laboratory analysis to a French biologist, Roger Haim. Gordon Wasson was later sent the mushrooms to the laboratory, Sandoz, to conduct a further study with Albert Hofmann, and he discovered the psychoactive substances in these psilocybe mushrooms and called them psilocybin and psilocin. He also performed research and found that the seeds of the flower morning glory also had psychoactive properties and were being ingested by the indigenous people. Albert Hofmann, who discovered the LSD-25 molecule, was saying that LSD should be included with other psychoactive substances in the plant medicine group. DMT, dithiotryptamine, was made into synthetic versions and called mescaline, ibogaine, and harmine. DMT was also found in the liquid that comes out of the glands and skin of the Bufo alvarius toad and carries psychedelic substances identified as DMT-5. Ayahuasca also carries DMT in the vine and leaves, which when brewed together provide natural medicine used by the indigenous people for unknown amount of centuries. Another plant, called marijuana, was found in the mid-1960s. One is called THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, and the other is cannabinol, CBD, which has more properties for healing pain. THC has psychedelic properties, whereas CBD marijuana doesn't cause any psychotropic effects. Psychedelic plants bring about states of consciousness that transcend the conscious mind. The Rig Veda is one of the oldest texts on the planet, and there are many verses and information that mention a holy brew called Soma. Soma had the ability to provide expanded states of consciousness and allowed people to transcend the third-dimensional reality. In the Rig Veda, it was mentioned that the initiates would experience a great light or enlightenment and the discovery of God or God realization. The Persia, Astrio, and Zen Vesta texts are one of the oldest in the world and describe a holy tea called Heoma. In ancient China, the usage of cannabis, also known as marijuana, was documented by the Chinese Emperor Shen Nang from as far back as 2737 BC. It was used for healing, relaxation, and during spiritual ceremonies. It is theorized that entheogens were used in early Jewish times. In the Bible, in the Old Testament, a white substance called manna is mentioned, and many feel it was psychedelic in nature. The Aztecs, Mayans, and Toltecs used peyote. There are also seeds from flowers such as morning glory and angel trumpets that have psychedelic effects and are currently used in addition to peyote for sacred ceremonies by indigenous natives in Mexico and North American tribes. The Amazonian sacred brew called ayahuasca goes back so far in history that no one really knows when it was used and when its use began for the South American native tribes. Ayahuasca is known for healing properties and for spiritual ceremonies. Ayahuasca is known as the plant that will cause an awakening and initiate one to a greater awareness, and it has been said by many indigenous people that the plants told them of the botanical, psychedelic properties that would allow the ancient Greeks the ability to cultivate these substances. The plant teachers would have instructed the herbalists in Greece the same way they would have taught the Mexican herbalist. Hence, the same psychedelic fungus was seen and experienced in both ancient cultures. It is believed by William Embodin, an ethnobotanist, that Datura and Nymphaea cerealia were plant-based. It's also known as the blue lotus. Entheogens used in Egyptian religious ceremonies. They would have come from the Mediterranean area, dried, and through the ancient spice route, be transported to Egypt. Other known entheogens were used in Egypt for medicine and sacred religious ceremonies. They would include ergot, mandrake, blue lotus, vitis, flowering plant datura, and opium poppy flower, plus possible others that are currently unknown. The acacia tree grew in ancient Egypt and had psychoactive DMT fungus that grew on it. In these entheogenic plants would cause an ego death and rebirth of mystical experiences that Egyptian initiates would have during the religious ceremonies. There is an ongoing list of entheogenic plants being researched and documented that are used in ancient Egypt. It is accepted that entheogens were a prominent part of Egyptian ancient life. Amanita muscaria is an entheogenic mushroom that was ground up and placed into wine for the initiates to drink, and they also ate the tops of the mushrooms. These practices go back to the Greek religious ecstasy festivals and sacred entheogenic ceremonies of the Dionysus the mysteries of the Eleusis, took place annually for the initiates for 2 millennia in ancient Greece. Then, with the rise in power of the early Christian Vatican Church in the 4th century, they deemed it pagan, heretical, and too wicked to continue, and therefore, shortly after the Council of Nicaea, decreed the Eleusis mystery ceremonies closed permanently. The secrecy only added to the mystery of the ceremonies, for all initiates were bound to keep what took place secret and never to reveal the details or their mystical experiences. People came from all over the world to participate in this once-of-a-lifetime experience, for the experiencer could participate in only one sacred ceremony. Each participant would go through only one initiation and therefore only one religious mysteries of Eleusis ceremony in their entire life. This mystical experience was highly prized. In the only thing that was shared was that it was a personally deep, meaningful, spiritual experience. Kukion is the mystic elixir that was served to the Eleusis mysteries participants, which included the ergot, clapviceps purpurea, which is the psychotropic properties, clapviceps and purpurea, which is the fungi mushroom species, grew on the local grains and wild grasses in the area near the Eleusis temple complex. A mythical story about a Greek goddess called Persephone is that while she was picking flowers, she was abducted by Hades, and he took her to a lower spiritual realm where the dead reside. The type of flower, narcissus, would have hallucinogenic alkaloids and is also called Persephone's flower. Plato, who was a recorded initiate of the Eleusis mystery ceremonies, wrote stories of a maiden called pharmacia, also known as use of drugs, in which he alluded to the priest class's usage of psychedelics in the Eleusis mysteries in Greece. Plato was basically saying in the allegory that Persephone was taken over by ingesting a flower with psychotropic properties and then having mystical experiences. In Greek culture and in many agricultural cultures, the sacred marriage is the union between the spiritual realms and all the vegetation, sentient beings on earth. The spiritual beings dance with the vegetation beings and bring light, which provides nourishment to plants, which then feed all of life. It is known in the Eleusis mysteries that a holy brew was served to the initiates, and it forever changed how they saw themselves and the external world of appearances. They experienced the ego death and saw that there was no reason to fear a death of their mortal body. This was such a sacred experience. These sacred entheogenic ceremonies stayed in existence for almost 2,000 years. The end of these Eleusis mysteries came because of a Christian emperor, Theodosius, who decreed that they must stop and considered them pagan. There was a gigantic hall in Eleusis where over 3,000 initiates would participate in the highly spiritual entheogenic ceremonies at the same time. There were several famous initiates that participated in the Eleusis mysteries over the 2,000-year time frame, including Plato, Aristotle, the Emperor Marcus Aurelius, and the Roman lawyer and consul Marcus Cicero, who later became a philosopher and reported about these ceremonies that were the cause that shaped civilizations. In the Eleusinian mythical traditions, death and rebirth were the cycle of life in agricultural societies. The Greek god called Dionysus provided the cultivation of barley and, once fermented with a fungus, would provide a drink containing hallucinogenic substances. Clearly, ergot of barley is the likely psychotropic ingredient in the Eleusinian potion. In the Greek culture, fermented drinks of all kinds were used, made from different plants, fruits, grains, and herbs. The Eleusis Mysteries was an annual event of participants who were initiated in order to have an actual mystical experience. Eleusis was not a spiritual school, it was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, and others could not break their initiation vows of silence, for death was the penalty. And yet, they hinted on how glorious it was to have the Eleusis Mysteries experience. Religions today talk about these mystical states of being, yet they don't offer any direct, first-hand mystical experience of connection with the divine essence. Anyone who was interested in spirituality and the mystery of life, and who wanted to experience the arcane truths directly for themselves, came to Eleusis to be initiated into the mysteries. The Eleusis Mysteries lasted for almost 2,000 years and were put to an end by Theodosius, a newly converted zealot Christian who was a Roman emperor. The mysteries of Eleusis delivered what was promised to the participants, which is why it lasted so long. Each Eleusis initiate would have visions and removal outside of their body to experience their divine self, and thus their immortality, seeing that there is life beyond this physical plane of existence. The Eleusis Mystery entheogenic potion served to all the initiates was called kyukion. Once a person was initiated and therefore went through the mystical experience, they had achieved the designation of epotes, which denotes the one who has seen it all. The mystical experience forever changed those epopists who continued on with their lives, became awakened, cracked the riddle of life, and saw their true divine nature. When the time came for the passing from this physical life, the epotes were no longer afraid of death, for they had already known what lies on the other side, remembering their true self-identity, which is eternal. It was the entheogen that facilitated this mystical experience for each participant. Before all the major religions of the world, there was Eleusis. The spiritual center of the world was Eleusis, and people came from all over to have the mystical experience that was promised would change their life forever. The entheogenic visionary brew called kyukion redeemed them from the dream state and awakened them to their divine nature of immortality. It was an honor and a once-in-a-lifetime event to be able to be initiated into the Eleusis Mysteries, and therefore be included in this religious community. A participant could be initiated only once in their life. The Eleusis initiation was a major part of the Greek culture, and people came far and wide to be among the participants who encountered these sacred ceremonies. All walks of life came to be initiated into the Eleusis Mysteries, from the top dignitaries, royal families, and political leaders to poets, authors, teachers of all levels and subjects, as well as slaves and free people. No one was turned down based on economic, civil, or vocational status. The tide turned against these spectacular opportunities that the Eleusis temple offered the population, which was allowed for everyone to experience for almost 2 millennia. The Christian Vatican Church in the 4th century had become a new official religion in Greece and thus ended the Eleusis ceremonies permanently. The area god of Clapsis used in the Eleusis mysteries came from barley and local grasses, not rye. It is undisputed that the Eleusis potion had an ergot substance in it and was ingested during the ceremony that created the sovereign and highest point of a spiritual experience. Evidence shows that ergot grew on local grasses in Greece and also on barley grain. Greeks learned that ergot had a fungus that had psychedelic properties. Rye did not come a part of any diet until after the start of the Christian era in 313 AD. The Greek Eleusis ceremonies were ended by the Christian Church decree from Rome shortly after 313 AD. Once someone has a sacred mystical experience, it is hard to put it into words, and the initiates of the Eleusis mysteries were bound to secrecy. All the information found on what happened in the Eleusis annual religious ceremonies verifies that psychedelic substances were used to facilitate the mystical experience for the participants. The Eleusis mysteries were celebrated by thousands of people each year. The Eleusis temple complex was just outside Athens. 2 Eleusis mystery ceremonies were held twice a year, one ceremony in the spring and the other ceremony in the autumn. During the years that Eleusis mystery ceremonies took place, the secrecy kept so prominently that even to this day, no one really knows all the complete details of what took place during these sacred plant ceremonies. The Roman statesman Cicero, who was a documented participant of the Eleusis mystery ceremony, wrote that individuals from all over the world made a pilgrimage to the Eleusis mysteries temple for initiation. The entheogenic mystical experiencer was unable to put into words their Eleusinian mystery ceremony, and therefore this once-in-a-lifetime precious memory was ineffable. These are the symptomatic reactions, not to a drama or ceremony, but to a mystical vision. And since the site could be offered to thousands of initiates each year, dependable upon schedule, it seems obvious that a hallucinogen must have induced it. Based upon what little the Eleusinian initiates did share, it was a transformational experience. Kykeon was a botanical elixir that was served to the Eleusinian initiate. Soma is a psychedelic served in India and Persian religious ceremonies to their participants in order for them to have a sacred mystical experience. It has been discovered that there is a connection between the Mexican mushroom and the Eleusis mysteries. The ineffable visions were described by the experiencers in both cultures, and mushrooms grew and were traded in the Greek culture. The Greeks have an expression that says, "Mushroom were the food of the gods," and considered holy plants. Mystical experience were much sought after and experienced by many in the Greek antiquity culture, and they were discussed in writings from many authors at that time. Plato even discussed how this magical mushroom was capable of providing mystical visions and was able to take one to realms beyond this physical world. Plato's teachings revealed, in allegory form, the sacred geometric patterns that are part of the mystical experience and many other deep esoteric meanings that only a participant would have learned while in the Eleusis temple during a religious entheogenic ceremony. The Greek word ekastasis was the name of the elixir given to the religious initiates during the entheogenic ceremony, and the meaning of the word is flight of the soul, to explain leaving the body to travel into other realms. And this is what this sacred drink offered to anyone who ingested it during the Eleusis mystery ceremony. The name of the Mexican mushroom is called agape of Mexico and describes the same mystical experiences as the ekastasis of the Eleusis ceremonies. Entheogens are recorded in ancient Greece in Eleusis and in the Temple of Hathor in Egypt. We need to realize that because of trading routes all over the ancient cultures, entheogens were readily available. Our modern thinking causes us to believe that ancient cultures did not use psychotropic plants for healing, visions, and religious ceremonies because of the fact that they're not legal and are freely available to the public today. Entheogens were part of the ancient cultures. Psychedelia was, in many ways, legal in the ancient world, and is simply historically inaccurate to imagine otherwise. Even the early Christians, who were known as the Nazarenes and later called the Gnostic Christians, utilized the sacred entheogens for their spiritual initiations and ceremonies. The merging of the Neoplatonists and the Nazarenes created the sect known as the Gnostics. Neoplatonic followers had a wide array of entheogens used in their religious ceremonies. Plato is an Eleusis Mysteries initiate and would have passed on to his students the blessings of information regarding the use of entheogens in religious ceremonies for further expansion of first-hand mystical experiences. Thank you for joining me as I went over Chapter 3. If you have any questions or comments on this video, please notate them in the description below. I look forward to hearing your feedback. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for joining me today. I have enjoyed spending this time with you. If you'd like additional information about me, click on my website listed in the description. Until next time.